In the depths of space, where mercy is a luxury few can afford, there exists a simple truth that every species learns eventually. Never underestimate a human with nothing left to lose. Commander Zephyr thought he knew humans: weak, emotional, easy to break. When he ordered his forces to leave Staff Sergeant Maya Chen bleeding out on the irradiated surface of Kepler 442b, he believed he was witnessing the end of human resistance in the Outer Rim. He was wrong. 3 months later, when Maya walked into his command center carrying his second-in-command severed head, Zephyr finally understood what the rest of the galaxy had been whispering about humans for decades. They don't just survive the impossible, they come back stronger, angrier, and with a very long memory. This is the story of how one woman's refusal to die became the nightmare that haunted an empire, and why the phrase "hell hath no fury" took on an entirely new meaning among the stars. The plasma rifle burned through Maya Chen's shoulder like molten metal, spinning her around and sending her crashing into the twisted wreckage of what had once been a human settlement. Blood poured from the wound, mixing with the radioactive dust that coated everything on Kepler 442b. The Zephyrian patrol had found them, just as they always did. Maya pressed herself deeper into the rubble, trying to make herself invisible as heavy footsteps approached. Through a gap in the debris, she could see the distinctive blue-black armor of the Zephyrian Empire's elite forces. Their insectoid faces were hidden behind combat masks, but she knew those glowing red optical sensors were scanning for any sign of life. Human thermal signatures are fading. One of them clicked in their guttural language. Maya had learned enough Zephyrian during her years fighting in the Outer Rim to understand their basic communications. The female appears to be dying. Commander Zephyr himself emerged from behind a collapsed building, his ceremonial skull crown glinting in the pale light of the system's dying star. At nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms in natural chitinous armor, he was an imposing figure even among his own kind. The collection of human skulls that adorned his battle harness clinked softly as he moved, each one a trophy from his campaigns against Earth's colonies. "Let me see her," Zephyr commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been disobeyed. 2 Zephyrian soldiers grabbed Maya by her arms and dragged her from the rubble. Her legs wouldn't support her weight, and she hung limply between them, blood dripping steadily from her wounds. The plasma burn in her shoulder had cauterized itself, but she could feel the radiation sickness already beginning to take hold. On a planet where the very air was poisonous to most carbon-based life, getting shot was often a mercy. Zephyr studied her with those cold, compound eyes. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chen," he said, pronouncing her name with deliberate care. "The ghost of Kepler, 442b. Do you know how many of my soldiers you have killed?" Maya lifted her head with tremendous effort, meeting his gaze with defiance that surprised even herself. "Not enough," she whispered, blood flecking her lips. The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. 43 confirmed kills, plus the destruction of 2 supply convoys and a communications relay. Impressive for a single human operating alone. He walked closer, his massive form casting her in shadow. "Tell me, Sergeant, what drives a member of your species to continue fighting when all hope is lost?" "You killed my team," Maya said, her voice growing stronger despite her injuries. "You killed my friends. You turned my home into a radioactive wasteland." She coughed, spattering more blood onto the ground. "Some things don't require hope." Zephyr nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had suspected. "Yes, this is what makes humans so troublesome. Your species' inability to recognize when you are defeated." He gestured to the devastation around them. "This planet is dead, Sergeant. Your colonies are ash. Your reinforcements are not coming. Yet here you are still fighting." "Here I am," Maya agreed. The commander studied her for a long moment, then made a gesture with one of his secondary arms. The soldiers holding Maya released her, and she collapsed to the ground, no longer able to keep herself upright. The radiation and blood loss were taking their toll, and she could feel her body beginning to shut down. "I have a choice to make," Zephyr said, pacing around her prone form. "I could execute you now, add your skull to my collection, and be done with this irritation. Or," he paused, seeming to consider his options, "I could leave you here to die slowly, as an example to any other humans who might be foolish enough to resist." Maya tried to push herself up on her elbows, but her strength failed her. "Get it over with," she gasped. "No," Zephyr decided. "I think a slow death suits you better. Let the radiation eat you from the inside. Let thirst and hunger finish what my plasma rifle started. Perhaps in your final moments, you will understand the futility of human defiance." He turned to his soldiers. "We leave her. Do not waste ammunition on a corpse-to-be. The planet will kill her soon enough." As the Zephyrian patrol moved away, their heavy footsteps gradually fading into the distance, Maya lay motionless in the radioactive dust. The pain in her shoulder had evolved into a deep, throbbing agony that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Each breath was a struggle, and she could taste copper and ash in her mouth. The settlement around her had once been home to 3,000 human colonists. They had come to Kepler 442b following reports of rare mineral deposits and the promise of a new life among the stars. Instead, they had found death when the Zephyrian Empire decided that human expansion needed to be contained. Maya remembered the first attack, how the orbital bombardment had turned the sky into a canvas of fire and destruction. She remembered the screams of children, the desperate calls for help that went unanswered, because Earth was too far away and too busy with its own problems to care about one small colony on the edge of known space. She had been part of the Colonial Defense Force, a former Earth military veteran who had signed up for what was supposed to be a peaceful mission. When the Zephyrians came, she had done what she could to organize resistance, to keep people alive, to buy time for an evacuation that never came. One by one, her team had fallen. Rodriguez, shot down while trying to repair their communications array. Martinez, killed by shrapnel when the Zephyrians bombed their makeshift medical station. Thompson, captured and executed publicly as an example to other resistance fighters. Maya had been the last one standing, waging a one-woman guerrilla war against an entire occupation force. She had survived by knowing the terrain, by moving at night, by hitting fast and disappearing before the enemy could respond. For 3 months, she had been a ghost haunting the ruins of her former home. Now, lying in the radioactive wasteland that had once been a thriving settlement, she wondered if it had all been for nothing. The colonists were dead. Her team was dead. Earth didn't even know what had happened here, and probably wouldn't care if they did. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Maya of the orbital bombardment that had started this nightmare. As darkness began to fall, she closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. But something deep inside her, something fundamental to her nature as a human being, refused to give up. Even as her body began to fail, even as the radiation poisoned her cells and the blood loss weakened her heart, a small spark of defiance continued to burn. She had survived the bombing. She had survived 3 months of guerrilla warfare against impossible odds. She had survived longer on this death world than any human should have been able to. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this too. Hours passed. The temperature dropped as Kepler 442b's thin atmosphere failed to retain the day's heat. Maya's breathing became shallow and irregular, but she held on. In her delirium, she began to remember her training, the survival courses that had been mandatory for all colonial defense personnel. Radiation exposure could be survived if treated quickly. Blood loss could be managed if the bleeding was stopped. Infection could be fought with the right antibiotics. But all of those things required medical supplies, and the nearest intact medical facility was probably on another planet. Still, Maya had learned a long time ago that survival wasn't about having the right equipment or the perfect circumstances. Survival was about refusing to quit when everything seemed hopeless. As the night wore on and her condition continued to deteriorate, Maya began to plan, not for death, as Commander Zephyr had expected, but for life, for revenge. For the day when she would make the Zephyrian Empire pay for what they had done to her world and her people. She might be dying, but she wasn't dead yet, and as long as she was breathing, she was dangerous. The last thing Maya saw before unconsciousness claimed her was the distant glow of the Zephyrian base camp, where Commander Zephyr was probably celebrating another successful pacification mission. She fixed that image in her mind, burning it into her memory like a brand. When she woke up, if she woke up, that base would be her first target. Because Staff Sergeant Maya Chen had just learned the most important lesson in the Human Survival Handbook. Sometimes the best way to win is to refuse to lose. And sometimes the best revenge is living long enough to deliver it personally. Maya Chen woke up to the sound of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears like thunder. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she had gotten there. Then the pain hit her like a physical blow, radiating out from her shoulder and spreading through her entire body in waves of pure agony. She was alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was alive. The first thing she noticed was that she was no longer lying in the open where Commander Zephyr had left her to die. She was in some kind of shelter, surrounded by rough stone walls that seemed to absorb what little light filtered down from above. The air smelled of metal and ozone, with an underlying chemical tang that made her nose burn. Maya tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the world spun around her. Her shoulder was wrapped in what appeared to be strips of fabric torn from her own uniform, and someone had managed to stop the bleeding. But the radiation sickness was still there, making her feel like her bones were made of lead and her blood was on fire. "Easy there, human," said a voice from the shadows. "You have been unconscious for 6 days. Your body needs time to recover." Maya's hand instinctively went for her sidearm, but found only empty holster. She squinted into the darkness, trying to make out who was speaking. The voice was definitely not Zephyrian, but it didn't sound human either. A figure stepped into the dim light, and Maya's breath caught in her throat. It was a Kytheran, one of the galaxy's most reclusive species. Standing about 6 feet tall with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, they were known for their advanced medical knowledge and their strict neutrality in galactic conflicts. What one was doing on a devastated world like Kepler 42b was a mystery. "My name is Healer Vex," the Kytheran said, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I found you after the Zephyrians left. You were very close to death." "Why?" Maya croaked, her throat raw and dry. "Why help me?" Vex tilted his head in a gesture that was oddly bird-like. "Because leaving someone to die when they could be saved goes against everything my people believe in. Also," he added with what might have been a smile, "because the Zephyrians have recently decided that my neutrality is no longer acceptable to them." He moved to a small table nearby and returned with a cup of water that tasted like liquid metal, but was the most refreshing thing Maya had ever experienced. As she drank, Vex continued his explanation. "My research station was destroyed 3 days ago. Commander Zephyr decided that studying the long-term effects of their orbital bombardment constituted collaboration with enemy forces. Apparently, documenting war crimes is now considered an act of war." Maya finished the water and looked at her unexpected savior with new understanding. "So you're stuck here too. We are both refugees now." "Yes. Though I suspect you have plans that go beyond mere survival." Maya tested her strength by attempting to stand. Her legs were shaky, but they held her weight. The radiation sickness was still there, a constant burning in her cells, but it seemed to have stabilized rather than continuing to worsen. "What did you do to me?" "Kytharan medical technology is quite advanced," Vex replied evasively. "I was able to flush most of the radioactive particles from your system and repair some of the cellular damage. You will never be completely healthy again, but you should be functional." Functional. Maya almost laughed at the understatement. 6 days ago, she had been dying alone in the ruins of her world. Now she was standing, thinking clearly, and feeling stronger than she had any right to feel. The Kytheran had given her something more precious than medicine. He had given her a chance. "Thank you," she said simply. Vex waved away her gratitude. "Do not thank me yet. Your survival is only the first step. What you do with the life I have helped preserve will determine whether my actions were wise or foolish." Maya looked around the chamber more carefully. It appeared to be some kind of natural cave system, possibly an old lava tube that had been expanded and modified. She could see evidence of Vex's research equipment, most of it damaged, but some pieces still functional. More importantly, she could see her own gear, cleaned and organized in one corner. "My weapons?" she asked. "Mostly functional, though I took the liberty of modifying your ammunition." Vex produced her sidearm and handed it to her. "Standard plasma charges will dissipate too quickly in this atmosphere. I have recalibrated them for maximum effectiveness against Zephyrian armor." Maya checked the weapon automatically, noting the subtle changes to the power cell and firing chamber. Whatever Vex had done, the modifications looked professional. "You know weapons?" "I know physics," Vex corrected. "And I know that Zephyrian chitin has a specific molecular structure that can be exploited if you understand the proper frequencies." Maya holstered her weapon and moved to examine the rest of her equipment. Her rifle was there, along with her remaining ammunition, her field kit, and several items she didn't immediately recognize. "What are those?" "Gifts," Vex said with that almost smile again. "Tools that might prove useful for someone planning to wage war against an occupying force. Electromagnetic pulse grenades, adaptive camouflage gel, long-range communications equipment that the Zephyrians cannot intercept." Maya picked up one of the EMP grenades, feeling its weight in her hand. It was smaller than Earth military ordnance but seemed to pack considerable power. "Why are you helping me like this?" Vex was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the dim light. "Because I have spent the last year documenting what the Zephyrians have done to this world, the systematic execution of civilians, the use of chemical weapons against refugee camps, the deliberate contamination of water supplies. What they have done here is not war. It is genocide. He gestured toward a datapad near his workstation. I have recorded everything. Testimony from survivors, analysis of weapons residue, proof that the Zephyrian Empire has violated every treaty governing warfare in civilized space. But evidence means nothing without someone to act on it. Maya understood. You want me to be your weapon. I want you to be what you already are, Vex corrected. A human who refuses to surrender. I am simply providing you with better tools. Maya spent the next several hours familiarizing herself with Vex's gifts and learning about what had happened during her unconsciousness. The Zephyrian forces had consolidated their position, establishing a permanent base in what had once been the colony's main settlement. They were stripping the planet of its valuable resources while conducting what they called pacification operations against any remaining human survivors. According to Vex's intelligence, there were still small groups of colonists hiding in the ruins of other settlements, but they were being hunted systematically. Commander Zephyr was taking no chances. He wanted every human on Kepler 442b dead or captured before the Empire's mining operations could begin in earnest. How many soldiers does he have? Maya asked, studying the surveillance images Vex had managed to capture. Approximately 200 combat troops, plus support personnel, 3 heavy gunships, orbital reconnaissance drones, and a communications array that keeps them in contact with the main fleet. Maya nodded thoughtfully. In a straight fight, 1 human against 200 Zephyrians would be suicide. But Maya had never been interested in straight fights. Her success over the past months had come from thinking like prey while striking like a predator. I need to know their patrol routes, she said, guard rotations, supply schedules, weaknesses in their perimeter. I have been monitoring them since my station was destroyed, Vex replied, producing another datapad. Their security is efficient but predictable. They rely heavily on their superior technology and numbers, which makes them vulnerable to asymmetric tactics. Maya studied the information, her mind already beginning to formulate plans. The Zephyrians had made a critical error when they left her alive. They had given her time to adapt, to learn, to become something more dangerous than they could imagine. But first, she had a more immediate concern. Are there other humans still alive out there? Vex nodded. Small groups, families mostly, hiding in the ruins. They have no organization, no leadership, no real hope of survival. The Zephyrians find them eventually. Maya felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. She had spent 3 months fighting alone, but perhaps it was time to expand her operations. One ghost was dangerous enough, but a coordinated resistance movement could be devastating. Can you reach them? The survivors? With the right equipment, yes. But Maya, Vex used her first name for the first time, his voice carrying a note of warning. These people are broken. They have seen their friends and families slaughtered. They have lost everything. They will not be easy to turn into soldiers. Maya checked her weapon again, feeling its familiar weight in her hand. I'm not looking to turn them into soldiers, she said. I'm looking to turn them into humans again. And humans fight back. She looked at the Kithrin who had saved her life and given her the tools for revenge. How long before you think they notice that my body isn't where they left it? Vex consulted one of his monitoring devices. Zephyrian patrols do not typically return to areas they consider cleared, but they will eventually notice when their casualties begin mounting again. Maya smiled for the first time in 6 days. It was not a pleasant expression. Good. Let them notice. Let them wonder. Let them start looking over their shoulders and checking the shadows. She began gathering her equipment, testing each piece to ensure it was ready for immediate use. The adaptive camouflage gel was particularly interesting, a Kithrin innovation that could bend light around the wearer, making them nearly invisible to most optical sensors. There's something else, Vex said quietly. Commander Zephyr has been using your supposed death as propaganda. He has broadcast messages throughout the sector claiming that human resistance on Kepler 442b has been completely eliminated. He is using your execution as proof of Zephyrian superiority.
Maya paused in her preparations.
Is that so? He has made you into a symbol of human weakness, a cautionary tale about the futility of resisting the Empire. Maya's smile became wider and considerably more dangerous. Well then, she said, I suppose it's time to ruin his narrative. She stood, fully equipped and ready to return to a war that everyone thought was over. The radiation sickness still burned in her cells, and she would never be as strong as she had been before. But she was alive and armed and absolutely furious. Commander Zephyr thought he had killed Staff Sergeant Maya Chen. He thought he had ended the human resistance on Kepler 442b. He thought he could use her death as a symbol of his victory. He was about to learn that reports of her death had been greatly exaggerated, and that making an enemy of a human was far more dangerous than killing one. The first patrol never saw her coming. Maya had spent 2 days observing their patterns from the ruins of the old communications center, using Vex's enhanced optics to study every detail of their movement. The Zephyrians were professional soldiers, but they had grown complacent in their victory. They moved through the devastated colony like tourists rather than occupiers, confident that all threats had been eliminated. That confidence died with Patrol Group 7. Maya struck at dawn, when the pale light of Kepler 442b's dying star created long shadows between the ruined buildings. She had coated herself in Vex's adaptive camouflage gel, making her nearly invisible against the broken concrete and twisted metal of what had once been a residential district. The patrol consisted of 4 Zephyrians in standard combat armor, moving in a loose formation that suggested they expected no resistance. Their leader, a minor officer whose skull crown marked him as a veteran of multiple campaigns, was actually humming what sounded like a Zephyrian victory song. Maya let them pass her position, then emerged from concealment like death itself. The modified plasma charges that Vex had prepared for her punched through Zephyrian armor like it was paper. The first soldier dropped without a sound, his chest cavity vaporized by a perfectly placed shot. The second turned just in time to see Maya's rifle swinging toward him, but not in time to raise his own weapon. The third and fourth soldiers managed to get off a few wild shots, but Maya was already moving, using the rubble and debris as cover while she picked them apart with surgical precision. Within 30 seconds, 4 Zephyrian soldiers lay dead in the ruins, and Maya had vanished back into the shadows. She took their weapons, their ammunition, and their communications equipment. Most importantly, she took their helmet recordings, which would show exactly how quickly and efficiently they had been eliminated. Then she rigged their bodies with one of Vex's EMP grenades, set to detonate when the recovery team arrived. The explosion would destroy any useful evidence while sending a very clear message: the ghost of Kepler. 442B was back, and she was angrier than ever. Maya's next target was a supply convoy that ran between the main base and an outlying checkpoint every 3 days. According to Vex's intelligence, the convoy carried food, ammunition, and medical supplies for the outer patrols. More importantly, it carried communications gear that would allow Maya to begin the next phase of her plan. She chose her ambush point carefully, selecting a narrow pass between 2 collapsed buildings where the convoy would have limited maneuverability. Using the technique she had learned during her months of guerrilla warfare, Maya spent hours preparing the battlefield, placing improvised explosives and creating escape routes through the rubble. The convoy consisted of 3 vehicles, 2 light transports flanking a heavier supply truck. Maya waited until they were committed to the narrow passage before she struck. The first explosion took out the lead transport, flipping it onto its side and blocking the convoy's forward movement. The second explosion, timed perfectly, destroyed the rear vehicle and prevented retreat. In the space between heartbeats, Maya had turned an armored convoy into a collection of trapped targets. The Zephyrians responded exactly as she had predicted, dismounting from their damaged vehicles and attempting to establish a defensive perimeter. They were well-trained and disciplined, but they were fighting an enemy they couldn't see in terrain that favored stealth over firepower. Maya moved through the ruins like a predator, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before the enemy could respond. She used the advanced ammunition that Vex had prepared, each shot precisely aimed to exploit weaknesses in Zephyrian armor and anatomy. When they tried to coordinate their response, she jammed their communications with captured equipment. When they attempted to call for backup, she used their own codes to send false all-clear signals. By the time the ambush was over, 12 more Zephyrians were dead, and Maya had captured enough supplies to sustain herself for weeks. But the real prize was the communications array she pulled from the wreckage of the command vehicle. That night, hidden in one of Vex's carefully concealed shelters, Maya began broadcasting on the emergency frequencies that the scattered human survivors would be monitoring. Her message was simple but powerful. "This is Staff Sergeant Maya Chen. I am alive and I am fighting. If you can hear this, respond with your location. It's time to take back our world." The responses came slowly at first, tentative and fearful. Many of the survivors had assumed that Maya was dead, killed along with the rest of the organized resistance. But gradually, as word spread through the ruins, more voices joined the network. There was Dr. Sarah Martinez, a medic who had been treating wounded civilians in a hidden clinic beneath the old hospital. There was Engineer First Class Kim Park, who had been maintaining power systems for a group of refugee families. There was even a small group of colonial militia who had managed to stay together after their unit was scattered. Maya coordinated with each group carefully using codes and protocols that only human military personnel would know. She couldn't risk the Zephyrians infiltrating her network, but she also needed to begin building the foundation for something larger than a one-woman war. Her first step was to establish safe houses and supply caches throughout the ruins. Maya had learned during her months of solitary fighting that mobility was everything in guerrilla warfare. The ability to strike fast and disappear was useless unless you had somewhere safe to retreat to. Working with the survivor groups, Maya began creating a network of hidden bases connected by carefully concealed routes through the rubble. Each base was stocked with weapons, medical supplies, and communications equipment salvaged from Zephyrian casualties. More importantly, each base was positioned to support the others, creating overlapping fields of fire and multiple escape routes. The Zephyrians noticed the increased activity within days of Maya's return to the battlefield. Commander Zephyr himself led the investigation into the missing patrols, his fury evident in the harsh orders that Maya intercepted through captured communications. "Impossible," she heard him snarl during one particularly heated exchange with his subordinates. "The human female is dead. I saw her die myself. This is some kind of deception." But the evidence was mounting too quickly to ignore. Patrol after patrol failed to report in. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Checkpoint guards were found dead at their posts with no sign of how their killer had approached or escaped. Maya made sure that the Zephyrians knew exactly who was responsible. At each attack site, she left a calling card, a simple message burned into metal or concrete with a plasma cutter. "Ghost 7 sends her regards." Ghost 7 had been her call sign during the initial resistance, before her team had been systematically eliminated. The name carried personal significance, but it also served a tactical purpose. By claiming credit for her attacks, Maya was accomplishing two goals simultaneously. She was building her legend among the human survivors while creating paranoia among the Zephyrians. The psychological warfare was just as important as the physical attacks. Every Zephyrian soldier on Kepler 442b now knew that there was a human out there who had survived what should have been certain death, who struck without warning and disappeared without a trace. Some of them were starting to check corners twice, to hesitate before entering buildings, to jump at shadows. Fear was a weapon that Maya wielded with surgical precision. But her greatest success came when she made contact with Engineer Park's group and learned about the Zephyrian mining operation. The Empire wasn't just occupying Kepler 442b for strategic reasons. They were strip mining the planet for rare elements needed for their advanced weapon systems. The mining equipment was heavily guarded and well defended, but it was also the key to the entire occupation. If the Zephyrians couldn't extract resources from the planet, there would be no reason for them to maintain such a large military presence. Maya began planning an assault on the mining complex, but she knew she would need more than stealth and superior tactics to succeed. She would need an army. Fortunately, she was starting to build one. The survivors who answered her call were not soldiers in any conventional sense. They were doctors, engineers, teachers, shopkeepers, farmers, and families who had lost everything to Zephyrian brutality. They were untrained, under-equipped, and terrified. But they were human, and humans had one advantage that no other species in the galaxy seemed to understand. They got angry instead of giving up. Maya spent the following weeks transforming frightened civilians into a fighting force. She taught them basic tactics, showed them how to use captured Zephyrian weapons, and most importantly, helped them channel their fear and grief into focused rage. "The Zephyrians think we're weak," she told a group of new recruits as they practiced with improvised explosives in a hidden training camp. "They think we'll break under pressure, give up when things get hard. They're used to fighting species that surrender when defeat seems inevitable." She gestured toward the ruins visible through a gap in their shelter. "But they made a mistake when they decided to make this personal. They killed our families. They destroyed our homes. They turned our world into a graveyard. And now they want to strip mine what's left." Maya's voice carried the quiet intensity that had made her legendary among the resistance fighters who had survived long enough to hear it. Humans don't forgive that kind of thing, and we never, ever forget. The training was brutal but necessary. Maya pushed her recruits hard, because she knew that their first real engagement with Zephyrian forces would probably be their last if they weren't properly prepared. She taught them to move silently, to shoot accurately, and to think tactically under pressure. But most importantly, she taught them to be ruthless. "Mercy is a luxury we can't afford," she explained during a night training session. "The Zephyrians didn't show mercy to your children. They won't show mercy to you. If you hesitate, if you try to take prisoners or avoid civilian casualties, you'll be dead before you can regret it." By the end of the month, Maya had nearly 50 trained fighters under her command. It wasn't enough to challenge the Zephyrian occupation directly, but it was enough to begin the kind of coordinated campaign that would make Commander Zephyr wish he had killed her when he had the chance. The ghost of Kepler, 442b, was no longer alone. She had an army, and she was ready to use it. The attack on Mining Complex Alpha began at exactly 0347 local time, when Kepler, 442b's twin moons provided maximum shadow coverage across the installation's eastern approach. Maya had spent 2 weeks planning the assault, studying guard rotations, supply schedules, and structural weaknesses through careful reconnaissance. 50 human fighters moved through the ruins like ghosts, using every lesson Maya had taught them about stealth, timing, and coordinated tactics. They carried weapons stripped from dead Zephyrians, explosives assembled from mining equipment, and a burning desire for revenge that had been carefully nurtured over months of preparation. Maya herself led the primary assault team, moving through the complex's maintenance tunnels, while secondary teams created diversions at the perimeter. The Zephyrians had grown increasingly paranoid over the past month as patrol after patrol disappeared into the ruins, but they still couldn't defend against an enemy that knew their territory better than they did. The first explosions came from the eastern perimeter where Dr. Martinez's team detonated charges near the main power station. Emergency lights bathed the complex in red as Zephyrian soldiers rushed to respond to what appeared to be a direct assault on their critical infrastructure. While the defenders focused on the obvious threat, Maya's team emerged from the tunnels directly beneath the complex's command center. The plasma charges that Vex had modified for her made short work of the floor plating, and Maya's fighters poured into the facility's nerve center like avenging spirits. The Zephyrian communications officer died before he could send a distress signal. The duty commander managed to draw his sidearm but not to fire it. Within 90 seconds, Maya's team had secured the command center and begun downloading critical intelligence about Zephyrian operations throughout the sector. But the real prize was Major Vorth, Commander Zephyr's second-in-command, who had been supervising the night shift personally. Maya found him attempting to destroy classified files when she kicked down the door to his office. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Vorth said, his forearms raised in surrender. "I heard you were dead. Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," Maya replied, keeping her rifle trained on his chest. "Major Vorth, isn't it? The butcher of Kepler, 437C?" Vorth's mandibles clicked nervously. "I am a prisoner of war. The Galactic Accords require that I be treated according to civilized standards." Maya's expression didn't change. "The Galactic Accords were voided when your forces started executing civilians. You're not a prisoner of war, Major. You're a war criminal." She gestured toward the window, where the glow of burning facilities painted the night sky in shades of orange and red. "How many children did you kill on Kepler 437C? How many hospitals did you bomb? How many refugee camps did you gas?" "I was following orders," Vorth protested. "So were the guards at the concentration camps on Old Earth," Maya said coldly. "Didn't work as a defense then either." The execution was swift and professional. Maya had learned long ago that prolonged torture served no tactical purpose beyond personal satisfaction, and personal satisfaction was a luxury she couldn't afford. Vorth's death was a message, nothing more and nothing less. She had Engineer Park's team rig the Major's corpse with a small explosive device before they evacuated the complex. When the Zephyrian reinforcements arrived, they would find their second-in-command's body booby-trapped with a timer and a very specific message burned into the wall behind his desk. "Commander Zephyr, you left me for dead. I'm returning the favor." Ghost 7. The retreat from Mining Complex Alpha was as carefully orchestrated as the assault had been. Maya's teams melted back into the ruins, using pre-planned routes that avoided Zephyrian patrols and surveillance zones. By the time the reinforcements arrived, the attackers had vanished completely, leaving only destruction and death behind. The psychological impact of the raid was immediate and profound. Word spread through the Zephyrian ranks that their second-in-command was dead, killed by a human who was supposed to be a corpse rotting in the radioactive wastelands. Patrol schedules became erratic as officers struggled to maintain morale among troops who were beginning to question their invincibility. But Maya knew that the real test would come when Commander Zephyr responded to the escalation. She didn't have long to wait. The counteroffensive began 3 days after the mining complex attack. Zephyrian forces, reinforced by additional troops from their orbital fleet, swept through the ruins in a coordinated search-and-destroy mission designed to eliminate the human resistance once and for all. They found nothing. Maya had anticipated the response and prepared accordingly. Her fighters had vanished into carefully concealed bunkers and hidden shelters, while she herself retreated to a command post that Vex had helped her construct deep beneath the ruins of the old colonial government building. From there, she monitored Zephyrian communications and coordinated hit-and-run attacks designed to bleed the enemy without engaging in direct confrontation. The Zephyrians' frustration was evident in their increasingly desperate communications. Their sweeps turned up abandoned camps and cold trails, but no active resistance fighters. Meanwhile, their patrols continued to take casualties from booby traps, sniper attacks, and ambushes that struck without warning and melted away before reinforcements could arrive. Ghost contacts became the standard report from Zephyrian field units. No confirmation of target acquisition. Maya listened to their tactical chatter through captured communications equipment, cataloging their positions and identifying patterns in their search protocols. The Zephyrians were methodical and professional, but they were fighting an enemy that understood their psychology better than they understood themselves. The breakthrough came when Maya intercepted a coded transmission between Commander Zephyr and the orbital fleet. The message was heavily encrypted, but Vex's communications equipment included processing power that made even Zephyrian military encryption vulnerable to determined analysis. What Maya learned changed everything. Commander Zephyr was under pressure from his superiors to complete the pacification mission and begin full-scale resource extraction. The prolonged resistance on Kepler 442b was beginning to attract unwanted attention from other sectors, and the Empire's high command wanted the situation resolved quickly and decisively. But more importantly, Maya learned that Zephyr had been lying to his superiors about the scope of human resistance on the planet. His reports claimed that only a few scattered survivors were still active, when in reality Maya's network had grown to include nearly 200 active fighters supported by twice that many civilians. Zephyr was trapped between his reputation and reality. If he admitted the true scope of the resistance, he would be relieved of command for allowing the situation to deteriorate. If he continued to downplay the threat, he risked being exposed when the resistance achieved something that couldn't be covered up. Maya decided to help him with that decision. Her next target was the orbital communications relay that connected Zephyrian ground forces with the fleet above. The relay was heavily defended and located in the center of the main Zephyrian base, making it seemingly impossible to attack without triggering a massive response. But Maya had learned that seemingly impossible didn't mean actually impossible. It just meant that conventional tactics wouldn't work. She spent a week studying the base's layout and defenses, using reconnaissance drones that Engineer Park's team had assembled from salvaged components. The relay itself was protected by multiple layers of security, including automated defense systems that would respond to any direct assault within milliseconds. However, the relay's primary weakness was the same as every piece of advanced technology. It required power, maintenance, and human supervision to function properly. Maya's plan focused on exploiting those mundane necessities rather than attempting to overcome the sophisticated defenses. The attack began with a series of coordinated strikes against Zephyrian infrastructure throughout the occupied zone. Maya's teams hit power substations, water treatment facilities, and supply depots in rapid succession, forcing the defenders to spread their forces thin while responding to multiple emergencies. While the Zephyrians scrambled to protect their critical installations, Maya herself infiltrated the main base using a captured uniform and forged identification codes. The adaptive camouflage gel that Vex had provided made her nearly invisible to electronic sensors, while her knowledge of Zephyrian protocols allowed her to move through the base without triggering security alerts. The communications relay was housed in a heavily armored bunker beneath the base's command center. Maya gained access by following a maintenance team through their scheduled inspection of the facility's primary power distribution network. Once inside, she placed a series of precisely targeted explosive charges designed to cause catastrophic system failures rather than simple destruction. The explosions, when they came, would look like equipment malfunctions rather than sabotage. The relay would fail gradually over the course of several hours, giving Maya time to escape while making it appear that the system had simply broken down under stress. But Maya had no intention of simply escaping. She had come to the Zephyrian base for a specific purpose, and that purpose was waiting for her in the command center 3 levels above the communications bunker. Commander Zephyr was alone in his private office when Maya found him, studying tactical displays that showed the chaos unfolding across his occupied territory. His skull crown gleamed in the light from the displays, each human skull a trophy from his campaigns against Earth's colonies. He didn't notice her at first, focused as he was on the reports of infrastructure failures and coordinated attacks that seemed to be happening everywhere at once. When he finally became aware of her presence, it was because she spoke his name. "Commander Zephyr," Maya said quietly. He spun around, his forearms reaching for weapons that weren't there. His office was supposed to be the most secure location on the planet, protected by multiple layers of security and surveillance. The idea that a human could simply walk in undetected was impossible. But there she was. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chen," Zephyr said after a moment, his voice carefully controlled. "I should have known." "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Maya agreed. Zephyr studied her with those cold, compound eyes. She looked different from the broken, dying woman he had left in the radioactive wastes. Harder, more dangerous. The radiation sickness had left its mark on her, but it hadn't weakened her. If anything, it seemed to have burned away everything soft and unnecessary, leaving only focused purpose behind. "What do you want?" he asked. Maya smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "I want to show you what happens when you make the mistake of leaving a human for dead." The fight was brief but decisive. Commander Zephyr was a veteran of dozens of campaigns and a skilled warrior in his own right. But Maya had spent months learning to kill Zephyrians with clinical efficiency, and she had advantages that he couldn't match. When it was over, Maya stood in the wreckage of Zephyr's office, holding the commander's severed head by its skull crown. Around her, alarms were beginning to sound as the communications relay finally failed completely, cutting the ground forces off from orbital support. She had a message to send to the Zephyrian High Command, and she knew exactly how to deliver it. Maya Chen walked through the main gates of the Zephyrian base, carrying Commander Zephyr's severed head like a trophy. And every soldier who saw her understood that everything had changed. The base was in chaos. With their communications relay destroyed and their commander dead, the Zephyrian forces had lost both coordination and leadership at the worst possible moment. Maya's coordinated attacks across the occupied zone had created dozens of emergencies that required immediate attention, but without central command authority, the response was fragmenting into confused panic. Maya herself moved through the confusion like a force of nature, no longer hiding or using stealth tactics. The adaptive camouflage gel had been washed away. Her weapons were visible and ready, and Commander Zephyr's head swung from her belt like a grotesque warning to anyone who might consider interfering with her mission. The first group of Zephyrian soldiers she encountered raised their weapons instinctively, then hesitated when they saw what she was carrying. That hesitation cost them their lives. Maya's modified plasma rifle spoke 4 times in rapid succession, and 4 elite warriors of the Zephyrian Empire collapsed in smoking heaps. Word spread through the base faster than Maya could walk. Soldiers abandoned their posts to either flee or converge on her position, but neither response was particularly effective. Those who fled left critical systems undefended, while those who came to fight found themselves facing an opponent who had spent months learning to kill their kind with surgical precision. Maya's destination was the base's central command center, where the surviving senior officers would be trying to re-establish control over the deteriorating situation. She wanted them to see their commander's head before they died. She wanted them to understand that the human they had dismissed as weak and easily broken had become their nemesis. The command center was heavily fortified, designed to withstand direct assault by conventional military forces. But Maya was no longer conventional by any definition of the word. She was something new, something that the Zephyrian military manual had no protocols for dealing with. The blast doors that protected the command center were rated to stop heavy artillery. Maya opened them with a shaped charge that she had assembled from components salvaged during her guerrilla campaign, demonstrating the kind of improvised engineering that had made humans notorious throughout the galaxy for their adaptability under pressure. Inside, she found exactly what she had expected. A dozen senior officers clustered around tactical displays, trying to understand how their supposedly pacified world had erupted into coordinated rebellion. They turned as one when the blast doors exploded inward, reaching for weapons while shouting orders in their guttural language. Maya killed them systematically, moving through the command center like death itself. Each shot was precisely aimed, each movement calculated for maximum efficiency. She had learned to fight Zephyrians by studying their anatomy, their reflexes, their psychology. She knew exactly where to place her shots for instant incapacitation. When the last officer fell, Maya stood alone in the smoking ruins of the command center, surrounded by the bodies of the Empire's best and brightest military minds. The tactical displays around her showed the true scope of what was happening across Kepler. 442b. Coordinated attacks striking every Zephyrian position simultaneously. Communication networks failing. Supply lines cut. Defensive positions overrun by fighters who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Maya activated the base's main communications array. She wanted every Zephyrian soldier on the planet to hear what she had to say, and she wanted the message to reach the orbital fleet as well. "This is Staff Sergeant Maya Chen," she began. her voice echoing through every helmet and command post in the Zephyrian military network. "Some of you know me as the ghost of Kepler 442b. Others know me as the human that Commander Zephyr left for dead in a radioactive wastes 3 months ago." She lifted Zephyr's severed head toward the communication array's video pickup, making sure that every viewer could see the fear frozen in the dead commander's compound eyes. "Commander Zephyr made a mistake when he decided to leave me alive," Maya continued. "He thought humans were weak. He thought we would break under pressure, surrender when things became difficult. He thought killing my friends and destroying my world would make me give up." Maya's voice carried the cold certainty of someone who had moved beyond anger into something far more dangerous. He was wrong about all of it. Humans don't break. We adapt, we learn, we become whatever we need to become in order to survive and fight back. She gestured toward the ruined command center around her. "Your elite forces are dead. Your infrastructure is destroyed. Your communications are compromised. Your mining operations have been reduced to smoking craters. And all of this was accomplished by the same species you dismissed as inferior." Maya paused, letting the implications sink in. "But this is just the beginning. Every human colony in this sector has heard about what happened on Kepler 442b. They know that the Zephyrian Empire thinks genocide is an acceptable tool of policy. They know that your treaties and your promises of peaceful coexistence are worthless." She moved closer to the pickup, ensuring that her image filled every screen in the Zephyrian network. "So here's what's going to happen next. You're going to withdraw from this system completely. You're going to return the resources you've stolen from our dead world, and you're going to publicly acknowledge what you've done here." Maya held up Zephyr's head again. "If you refuse, if you send reinforcements, if you try to continue this occupation, then every human in this sector will become what I became. Every one of us will learn to hunt you the way I hunted your commander. Every one of us will become a ghost that haunts your dreams and turns your superior technology into scrap metal." She set the head down on the communications console with deliberate care. "You have 24 hours to begin your withdrawal. After that, I start broadcasting the location of your remaining forces to every human resistance cell in known space. Let's see how your superior numbers and advanced weapons work against an entire species that has decided you need to die." Maya terminated the transmission and began implementing the final phase of her plan. The communications array that had carried her message to the Zephyrian forces was the same system that connected the orbital fleet to their base on the planet's surface. By modifying its broadcast parameters, she could turn it into a massive electromagnetic pulse generator that would disable every piece of Zephyrian technology within range. The process would destroy the array itself, cutting off her own communications with the resistance network she had built. But it would also cripple the remaining Zephyrian forces on the planet, leaving them stranded and defenseless while her fighters moved in for the kill. Maya worked quickly, using skills she had learned from Engineer Park's team to reconfigure the array's power coupling and transmission protocols. The modifications were dangerous and unstable, but they would accomplish her goal of creating a localized EMP burst powerful enough to disable military-grade shielding. As she worked, Maya could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the base around her. Her fighters had emerged from their hiding places to begin the final assault on the demoralized Zephyrian forces. Without coordination from their command structure, the enemy soldiers were fighting as individuals rather than as a unified military unit. The tide of battle had turned completely. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Zephyrian Empire was learning what it meant to face a species that refused to accept defeat. Maya finished her modifications to the communications array and prepared to activate the EMP burst. Before she did, she took one last look at Commander Zephyr's severed head, remembering the moment when he had decided to leave her for dead, rather than granting her a quick execution. "You were right about one thing," she told the lifeless skull. "Humans are different from other species, but you got the nature of that difference completely wrong." She activated the EMP generator, and every piece of Zephyrian technology on Kepler 442b died simultaneously. Vehicles stopped running, weapons failed to fire, communications went silent, and life support systems shut down. In the space of seconds, the most advanced military force in the known galaxy was reduced to a collection of confused and frightened individuals stranded on a hostile world. Maya emerged from the ruined command center into a base that had become a graveyard. Her fighters were moving through the facility methodically, eliminating the remaining Zephyrian soldiers with ruthless efficiency. The lessons she had taught them about mercy being a luxury they couldn't afford had been learned well. But the real victory was larger than the destruction of a single military base. Maya's message had been broadcast throughout the sector before the EMP burst destroyed the communications array. Every human colony that had received the transmission now knew that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated, that their supposedly invincible military machine could be brought down by determination and superior tactics. The rebellion that had started with one woman's refusal to die would spread across known space like a wildfire. Other worlds would follow Kepler 442b's example. Other humans would become ghosts haunting the Empire's dreams. As Maya walked through the ruins of the base that had once represented Zephyrian dominance over her world, she carried Commander Zephyr's head like a banner of victory. The skull crown that had once symbolized the Empire's conquest of human worlds now served as proof that even the mightiest predator could become prey when it made the mistake of underestimating its intended victim. Maya had kept her promise to the Zephyrian commander. She had shown him what happened when you left a human for dead. The lesson had been delivered in full, and the price had been paid in blood and fire. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, the ghost of Kepler 442b, had come back from the grave to claim her revenge, and in doing so, she had lit a flame that would burn across the galaxy until every human world was free, or until every Zephyrian soldier learned to fear the darkness where ghosts might be waiting. The war was far from over, but the Empire would never again make the mistake of thinking that humans were easy to break. Some species, when pushed to the edge of extinction, simply pushed back harder. Maya had proven that humans were definitely one of those species. The message had been delivered. The skull had been claimed, and somewhere in the ruins of what had once been a thriving human colony, a woman who had refused to die was teaching the galaxy's most feared military empire that they had picked a fight with the wrong species. The Zephyrians had wanted to make an example of Kepler 442b. Instead, they had created a legend that would haunt them for generations to come.